What up, guys? Welcome to Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Number doesn't really matter at this point. It's a lot of numbers, a three-digit number, somewhere in the threes, 87. Appreciate you guys for being here today. We're going to talk about a basic idea. So a lot of times, we talk about different ideas, have different interviews on here. Today is going to be one for probably a lot of the newer grapplers, in Jiu-Jitsu is going to be useful to you, but also what we're going to talk about is not I'll be honest with you. I didn't really embrace these ideas completely until I was probably like purple brown belt. And so if you can do that before then, you're ahead of the curve. But even then, as I'll talk about in the podcast, a lot of these ideas that we're going to talk about are things that you really have to keep coming back to over and over again, even as you become a good black belt or, advanced belt. Because again, I think a lot of times when you get into the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, which defense and escapes are fundamentals. They're required. They're building blocks. You have to have them. I don't think you can have a good jiu-jitsu game without decent escapes and defensive abilities. And with that, when you become more advanced, it's like a good book. You have to kind of go back and reread, because every time you go back through something in jiu-jitsu, as you improve, you see things you missed. It's like if you read a good book, there's certain books that I have, for instance, that I will reread periodically, or I'll reread through the highlighted parts and the notes that I took from it.
Mhm.
And I notice things that I see things differently as I change, because I'm in a different place, right? As you change, the way that you perceive things changes. And so a lot of times jiu-jitsu takes on this thing where, as an example, I remember years ago recording a seminar that we did at our gym, and it was a 2-day seminar, and there were a ton of drills that we were doing during the seminar. And I remember looking over that seminar and rewatching it tons of times, because I would sort of pick it apart. And as I improved with the movements and as I used them over and over again, and I would come back and watch them like a month later or whatever it was, I would see details I missed. Now, the details were always there. I just missed them.
Mhm.
And so the same thing happens here, is like when you go through jiu-jitsu, you're going to have to review all these different things over and over again, and you see new things you missed. And so as we go through this obviously is going to be most useful, I think, for the newer grapplers, your first few years of grappling, but plenty useful for anybody above that. And again, appreciate you guys for being here. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. If you guys have never checked them out, I encourage you to try the supplement out for a month and see how things go for you. Again, this is what I typically do with things when I share them with you guys. I try things out and I use them, and then I give you the results. I'm actually getting ready to talk about my experience with a company called First Optimal. They did all kinds of stuff with my thyroid and testosterone and everything else, and I'll give you guys the details on that soon. But again, with Charlotte's Web, they do a lot of cool things with cool products. They've got, obviously, CBD is their main thing, and they've been kind of the OG in that space for a long time. When I first heard about CBD, it was their product. And I remember kind of like thinking, yeah, right. This oil is going to somehow make all these different benefits happen that they were talking about. And was very skeptical. I eventually ended up trying some CBD from a person down in Costa Rica. I was surprised by its effects. I was like, that was actually noticeable. And so I started taking CBD, and for me, I started working with Charlotte's Web because the product is very reliable. CBD is unregulated, so sometimes I would I like, give you guys an idea. I was getting CBD sent to me, and I would try some people's CBD, and it would sometimes make me feel a little like loopy, like I was high, and sometimes I'd feel no effect. And then with Charlotte's Web, it's kind of the same consistency over and over again. It's because they're third party tested. They go through a very strict process for making their products. They also make a lot of other stuff like CBN products, which are great for sleeping. They make some things like functional mushroom products with reishi and lion's mane, balms, rubs, everything. If you guys want to check them out, go to their website at charlottesweb.com, and the promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off the order. Also, guys, if you want to support us, you can check out our sponsor, Epic Roll, rollbjj.com. Great company, made for jiu-jitsu practitioners by jiu-jitsu practitioners. It's black belts that are out there training and rolling just like us, and they support a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu community with what they do, and they make a lot of terrific products. Their shorts in particular are by far my favorite. I love their no-gi shorts. There's no Velcro strap. They fit really well. They've got a longer short fit if you like longer, or if you're like me and you don't skip leg day, you want the shorter shorts, they got those too. But again, they've got a lot of amazing products. If you want to check them out, go to their website at epicrollbjj.com. If you find something you like, use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. Also, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by rolling on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. I'm sure I know you guys know how this works. We're a podcast and we do these episodes for free. And if you really like it, you can always support us through the Patreon. When you go to the Patreon website, you go there and there are different perks that you can get for becoming a Patreon member. Should you like to do that, it's very inexpensive. It supports the podcast, helps us out. And again, it's a win-win. You get a lot of content that we've been creating and it's available to you, and you support the podcast that you're already listening to on a regular basis, hopefully. And you can check it out at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Last but not least, guys, before we get into it, if you guys, I'll mention this on the podcast later, if you guys want to get my daily email that I send out and get a free ebook that goes into strategies on how to improve faster in jiu-jitsu, really important, where if you're like most people training 1 to 3 days, you can go into the gym and just kind of go about it and blow off steam and train, which is perfectly fine. But if you actually want to get better at jiu-jitsu, and if you want to do so in a fairly quick manner, you've got to be focused. You got to be like dialed in on what you're actually trying to do. And you can do this from the time you're a beginning brand new white belt to a super advanced black belt. So in the ebook, I give you 12 different strategies on how to roll during those open mats, the open training sessions that everybody has access to, and teach you how to get more from those training sessions. And I give you some strategies to do it, plus some other things. And if you get some other resources along with that, and if you guys want to get those, plus my daily email that comes along with it, you can go to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. So guys, with that said, let's jump into the podcast. All right, guys, so let's get into these ideas as to, the benefits of becoming a master of defense and escapes in jiu-jitsu. And again, a lot of these, as you listen to them, are going to carry over to other aspects of jiu-jitsu. And again, I'm doing this because the mindset that you take into jiu-jitsu is really important, right? You're listening to a podcast, you're not watching a video, you're not training with me in person. So I think a lot of times the most powerful thing that you can get through something like this is a way of thinking, right? That's really what this is. When you listen to a podcast, especially with ours, the whole idea is to try to get you to go, good idea. And we can start to change the way that you think, because you think about it. Any major action that you've ever taken in your life started off with a thought, started off with an idea, started off with you changing the way that you thought about something, or maybe began to think about something, even thinking about jiu-jitsu, right? Like, how did that begin? Maybe you're watching the UFC and you're like, oh, that'd be a good idea. I want to go try that out. Or maybe your buddy, was wrestling with you and you felt helpless because you couldn't do anything. You're like, I need to learn this, right? In some way, shape or form, your mindset got shifted. And I think that's really important because, a lot of you that are listening, I know our audience, we do have a good number of higher level belts like brown and black belts. And that said, none of these tips are not usable for higher belts. They're all usable for higher belts. And I think oftentimes you have to revisit a lot of your defense and your escapes as a higher belt because it can become easier and easier to avoid the bad spots. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But at the same time, for the people that are in their first few years of training, it's incredibly important that you become, to the relative to your experience level, become skilled with escapes. Because if you can't escape, if you can't defend yourself in jiu-jitsu when you're in bad spots, it creates a lot of problems. And again, you have to understand the value in this. And a lot of times when you tell someone, hey, it's valuable to learn how to escape because, you can defend and escape, that's not really that much. That doesn't seem as exciting. It's kind of like when you tell someone to save money, it's not that exciting. Or if you tell someone to, hey, go get your regular blood work done. These things are like, when you think about like saving money, or you think about going to the doctor and having routine blood work, these are defenses against potential things that could happen to you, right? But they're not as fun as saying, for instance, like getting someone to get routine lab work done to check on their blood levels and everything else so that you can make changes way early rather than waiting when it gets too late. It's not as much fun as saying, hey, take this pill, all your problems will be gone. saving up money is not as fun as saying, hey, just slap it on a credit card and enjoy yourself now. Now those things become really important when, let's say, your blood work finds something, or shifts the gears and you fix a problem early, or with saving money, right? Like I remember in 2020, because I was a fairly frugal person, right? Like when 2020 happened, I was in a pretty good spot financially. Like we did all right anyway, but at the same time, like it wasn't something where the gym or myself were in dire straits because we were, living paycheck to paycheck, or any little thing could mess that up. And so it's just a good idea. So anyway, defense is important. Escapes are important. Escape effectively, you have less fear and worries on the mat. We're going to reiterate this point multiple times, but think about it. If you go into the gym, and many people are like this, right? If you are unable to escape a bad spot, you always have this underlying worry or fear in the back of your mind about what if this happens, and that really becomes a problem. And so one of the cool things that happens is when you get good at escapes, you can be put into any sort of position and you're not really all that worried. Even like last night, Eugene and I were rolling, and Eugene he got me in a good triangle, and he was, attacking different things like that. And I wasn't worried. I was just trying to figure my way through it because I had done a lot of defense and escapes from that position. If someone gets in side control, I don't really care. I'm fine. I can get out of it. I can defend myself pretty effectively. Kind of going along with that same one, the second one is that on top of this, when these kind of go together in a lot of cases, when you begin to become skilled at escapes and in defense, you can be more aggressive with your offense because you're not worried about the what ifs if the technique fails, right?
Yeah.
So, let's say, for instance, if you're on top, you got that chance to go for a submission. But anytime you go for a submission, you make space, you create openings for someone to take advantage of, right? That's just the way things work. When the position is static, when you're squeezing someone, holding someone, they're not moving. But at the same time, if you begin to move around for a submission, you create space, you create openings. And this is typically what the person on defense is looking for if they're smart, right? If you're squeezing really tight, they're probably not going to try to escape that. They're going to wait until you start to move a little bit, and those shifts, those subtle shifts of weight, allow for opportunities for them to escape. And so, if you are trying to be more aggressive with your offense, you have to know that if this completely fails and blows up in your face, and this person's now on top of you in a strong position, you got to know that you can get out of there.
Yeah.
And I tell you this from personal experience: the better my defense and escapes got, the better off my ability to be offensive was, because then I could go for things and not have to worry about what if.
Yeah. That's the main thing, like the ability to pull the trigger, to be aggressive, because I think when you start out as a white belt, you're so afraid, or even a blue belt, like you're so afraid of giving up something and then being stuck. Right. So now if you know that, like, hey, if I, go for something and I get stuck in not a bad spot, I'm gonna be okay. I'll at least be safe, be able to keep my limbs in, where I need them, and just be more controlled. And I think you become more patient too if you're in a bad position. I was working with one of our blue belts yesterday, and so I wasn't giving him a lot. I got in a dominant position. I wasn't giving him a lot, and I was like, "Hey, you just gotta be patient. You got to sometimes you just have to learn to be in that uncomfortable spot, but then look for your opportunities, and they will come. And then just know when to, because you don't want to be if your escapes are not great and you just panic and you just do all kinds of crazy stuff, you're going to wear yourself out, first of all. And number two, you're probably going to expose something and give up something. So just being in those positions, being patient, time in position, something we talk about as well. That's a common theme. That, I mean, obviously is going to make you better.
Mm-hmm. And to the third point, when you become skilled at escapes, this allows you to realize your true potential with your jiu-jitsu, because it's really hard to become your best, reach your potential, if you're afraid to go for it, right? So these are all stacking on top of each other. But think about it. I use this analogy pretty often. Let's say that you are on a date with someone, right? And you like this person, you enjoy their company, whatever. If you are on that date worried about, well, what if they don't want to hang out with me again, and so forth, so on, you're probably not going to be able to open up and be yourself, right? I remember this when I was younger. It was interesting. When I was younger, I remember when I was a little bit more insecure about myself, I would go on these dates with ladies, and I was never able to relax and really be myself early on in the dates. Now, it doesn't mean I would have routinely have second dates. We would end up in relationships and so forth and so on. And like, whatever, I'd get to know the person. But I found that I was a more charismatic person on a date with ladies when I didn't care. When I didn't, like, because if they didn't want to date with me, well, then who cares? I'm fine. It doesn't matter, right? And so when you lose again that worry, that fear, it allows you to actually be at your best, right? And again, you can't get rid of that fear until you have confidence. And this is the deal, right? Confidence is not built on faking. Like, I hate that term, fake it before you make it. Confidence comes from you actually developing a skill and actually developing like the character and everything else that lends itself to you being able to do something. If you're a confident person about something, it's because you can do it, not because you just faked it, right? As a coach, I can be confident because I've seen people make changes, win tournaments, whatever. In competitions, I'm a very confident competitor because I have a track record of doing stuff. When you want to become confident at escaping and defense, well, what do you got to do? You actually have to put yourself there. You can't just fake it. You actually have to do it. Otherwise, it's a complete sham, and deep down, you're going to know. And so, again, when you're trying to become your best, you're never going to be able to realize your true potential if you haven't mastered the defense and escaping parts. And I don't want to say mastered, but become skilled relative to your game and to your skill level at those things.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned earlier, just that you're hamstrung because you're afraid to pull the trigger. So I think your potential, obviously, yeah, if you're not afraid to, to go for it in very many aspects of life, right? If you're not afraid to risk it, go for something, reach out of your comfort zone a little bit. I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. Otherwise, you're going to be very conservative in the way you're going to live your life. It probably might be it's not always a bad thing, but like if you want to be really good or you want to accomplish bigger or better things, I guess you have aspirations. I think you gotta take risks, right? Like for you, for example, Chewy, is like you had a normal 9 to 5 job that was safe and secure, and you're gonna get this paycheck every week, but you're like, man, I want to do. And whenever you tell me that story, by the way, I think of you ever seen the movie The Incredibles?
Yeah, I think so. The superheroes, yeah.
Yeah, with the dad, and he's like in the tiny car, and he's like sitting in the office getting yelled at, and he's kind of miserable. And I was like, I think of you as kind of that kind of person. Like, just you're a fairly big guy, just sitting in the cubicle, just like deal with people.
Oh, bro.
But
It wasn't terrible, but the whole thing is just I
it was safe though, right? It was safe. It was a safe job.
It was money. It was good, but I despise middle managers. I despise managers. No offense to you guys that might be managers, right? Like,
managers, they said.
I hate this like thing because like in our situation, it was like guys were managers who had never actually really done the job that we were doing in a lot of cases, and sometimes they're managing it, and it's like, again, going back to it, like I'm looking through, like, you don't know what the hell we're doing. You're trying to manage me, and you have these metrics that you're beholden to, but really you have no idea what I'm doing, and you couldn't do this if you were sitting in my situation. You couldn't do this. And so it's like a jiu-jitsu coach who's never rolled trying to tell someone how to roll. You're like, you don't have the experience. You're just a guy who's just talking. But I hated that environment. I also hated the corporate environment because like, for instance, like one of the beautiful parts about owning a gym and owning a business is like, it honestly would probably be even worse today, because I remember I hate speaking in like PC language, right? I don't want to live my life constantly having to censor myself or choose certain words and be very careful. It's like, it sounds like a type of hell I don't want to live in, right? Whereas the mat room's always been one of those things where you just develop relationships with people, and we can say a lot of stuff that a lot of people wouldn't find very comfortable, PC, whatever, but nobody cares, right? And if you do care, it's probably not going to be the right place for you, and that's okay, because there's different places for different people, and that's okay. Like, you can find the place that suits you. And so I like, I really dislike the having to watch what you say, and I used to make jokes about corporate speak. You'd send an email and like you're basically telling someone go F off, but you're saying it in like this really roundabout way,
Mhm.
through corporate speak. And it used to drive me nuts. But yeah, I it takes a leap. Sometimes you got to take the leap, right?
Yeah.
Um, and be all right. Kind of going back to it though, if you want to like get into the sort of like analogy stuff, the only reason I was able to take the leap was because I had sort of purposely played very defensively with everything else in my existence, right? So like, I didn't have a credit card, no credit card debt, had no debt. So like that was what allowed me to say like, F it, if it doesn't work out, it's fine because I have no debt. If I had been in a situation where I had tons and tons of debt, I would have been screwed. I wouldn't have been able to do it because I would have had that nut that I had to pay off every month. You know what I mean? So it's like you kind of choose your risks. It's the same
Yeah.
reason why I've never owned a motorcycle. I think they're neat, but like the risk is terrible. Like, the way that I make my money and provide for my family is with my physical body. And I don't want to risk that. I wouldn't want to do it anyway, but just, you got to choose your risks, right? I see like pro athletes who, have motorcycle accidents, and I'm like, what the hell were you doing? A motorcycle? And like, you make your money with like, why didn't you just get a car? Go get an expensive car.
Yeah.
You know,
I've had a
it,
motorcycle.
I know you have. I
I
mean,
didn't.
and I make no bones about it. If you have a
I
motorcycle, that's fantastic. But I'm
I
saying,
sold it.
if you're an athlete, no. Why'd you sell it?
um, I had a kid,
Mm,
and I didn't want to be brain dead or severely injured. I've seen too much as a physical therapist. I've seen a lot of bad stuff happen.
yeah.
But also it was like, when you have a kid, it's not, you can't take your kid on the back of a motorcycle. So
Mm-mm.
you never, that thing just ends up sitting there for months and months, and you take it out every now and again. If you don't ride regularly, I mean, I think for me, still being a newer rider, I still wanted, like, I need to keep going. I need to keep
Yeah.
practicing. I just um and my wife got on the back one time, and we almost got hit by somebody that ran like a stop sign, and she's
Oh
like, I'm never
yeah.
getting back on this thing. So I was like, I'm just not gonna
Uh-huh.
ride this thing by myself.
That's it.
It's just it's fun. Like you said, you got to weigh the pros and cons. It's quite thrilling to, be on that thing and
Sure.
going at a pretty fast clip. But again, the risk is just not worth it. Especially, when I had kids, I was like, it just wasn't worth it to me. I'm not saying anything bad about anyone, and most people on motorcycles are very safe. It's just the other people, and we have a lot of
Uh,
distracted people.
That's what I
And,
was gonna say, bro. Like, it's
yeah,
not the people on the motorcycles, because generally
usually
you
not.
know,
Yeah,
they're focused because they have to be, right? But it's like when you drive your car around at night. I don't know if you ever do this. Like, you drive your car around at night, and if you just look over around you, you'll just see the faint blue glow of a phone screen staring back at someone as they're driving. And then you see it all day long where you're driving and you look around you and everybody's texting on their phones. I'm like, it's insane. It's
yeah,
literally like, this is where I always go back to it. People are in denial about their addiction to their phones. It's like, you can't put that damn thing down, right? Like,
yeah,
you're addicted to it. You can't stop fiddling with it when you're driving. Like, this is outrageous.
yeah.
And so, yeah, with people like that, that would be bad, because now you have a distracted person, who's not paying attention, who's driving a multi-thousand-pound vehicle and is going to ram right into God knows what.
Yeah, it usually doesn't turn out well for the person on the motorcycle. Just say that.
We had a woman run into our gym because she was distracted.
In her car, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, she was coming into the gym and literally turning into the gym, into the parking lot, was not paying attention, and just ran right over top of the curb and wrecked right into um the side of our wall, right? And like, she hit the brakes hard enough to hear screeching and create tire marks. So she was going fast enough, turning into the parking lot, that she just nailed it. I mean, like, when she hit the side of the wall, they had to redo the masonry, all the brickwork and everything else, because it was just destroyed.
Hmm.
Like, what are you doing, you crazy lady? And she said that she just like accidentally, was parked and had put it in drive and hit the whatever. I'm like, no, 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 because I look, there's
Sure.
tire marks from the middle of the parking lot. So you were coming in pretty quick and you just had to slam the brakes. So,
Huh.
there's that. Here's the next one for you guys. Get off our little soapbox here on distracted drivers and phone addiction. A lot of people, or in jiu-jitsu, this is really important, and it always, even when you get good at jiu-jitsu, you still have to come back and become better at your escapes, because one of the areas that will zap you the most as far as energy goes is being on the bottom of mount, bottom of side control, defending back mount. Those positions will burn you up. And so you last longer on the mats when you don't have a ton of fear and panic, and you know how to make efficient use of your energy, right? So when you're on those bad positions and you know when to push, when to shove, when to bridge, when to escape, when to just relax and breathe and do nothing, you're able to be more efficient. And those are really important traits, because one of the things that you'll see is that if someone puts you into a bad spot and they're not able to finish you off, when you escape, it's kind of exhausting for them, because now they're in a situation where it's almost as if, you had a boxer and the boxer just totally nailed this guy, threw him his best punch, and they just took it, nothing happened, right? Whereas now we're able to escape and get right out of it, no problem. This is something I'll do a lot of times when I travels. I'll just let people put me in really bad spots, and I do this in the gym too. Just put me in bad spots, just so I can work out of it, not to sort of prove that I'm better than them, but just to sort of keep that skill sharp of being able to efficiently and without any fear or panic escape positions. So this way it becomes just like any other position. When you can do that, you become more efficient, you use less energy.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think that was something with cardio. It's like something makes weakness. What is the cardio quote? I can't think of it.
Yeah, okay. So you're talking about like they'll say like it depends. There's one where like Saulo Ribero's quote is that, when you're late, you muscle. When you muscle, you get tired. When you're tired, you die. And then there's also, I remember like our wrestling coach would tell us that fatigue makes cowards of everyone.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
so when you get exhausted, one way or the other, you're just in a bad spot in jiu-jitsu, because you will do all kinds of stupid stuff. Like you could take the best black belts in competition jiu-jitsu, whatever, and if you watch them get tired, all of a sudden you watch them they start to do the things that we tell brand new white belts not to do. And it's not because they're skilled, it's because they're literally exhausted. And again, if they're getting cooked under a bad position, they start to get desperate. And so you want to try to mitigate that as much as possible.
No, I agree. That's the thing. I think fatigue and getting tired and get worn out, you see people break and sometimes they give stuff up, or they make really bad decisions on the mat. So I think if you're controlled with your you're efficient and you save that energy and use it at the right time in the right way, I think it's going to help you be a better grappler.
Next one is that when you avoid developing your escapes and your submissions, you become a grappler with a glass jaw. So there is, the term glass jaw, which we typically talk about with boxers, kickboxers, strikers, where they can dish out a punch, but they can't take it. Right. And I've seen a lot of grapplers with that, where they have a really strong offensive game, but as soon as the tide turns and they're put into a bad spot, all of a sudden they're shot. I've seen this plenty of times in competitions, even at the highest level, where you watch a guy and, he's coming at the person, he's taking it to him. And then if the person starts to turn it around and they come back at him and maybe put him in a bad position, then all of a sudden the person just wilts and falls apart. You don't want to be a grappler with a glass jaw. You don't want to have this, great offensive ability coupled with absolutely no defensive or escaping ability, because then you become a grappler of the same ilk. You become someone who can't take the punch, and you do not want that. That is not a good place to be in grappling. Again, deep down, you're going to know that one thing just can instantly shift gears on you, and you're dead in the water.
There was a fun instance at one of the Jiu-Jitsu Opens. It was in Louisville. One of our white belts, Alex, was he was in the open, like the white belt open division, and or beginner, whatever it is. And Alex gets his back taken, and the dude is just attacking him and he's all over him. Alex is fighting out of stuff. And then I look at the guy and I see he's starting to fatigue. I go, Alex, he's tired. I yell that, and I yell it for Alex, but I also yell it so his opponent will hear and believe it. and I could tell he was really tired. And so Alex reversed it, turns into him, and the dude literally taps from exhaustion. And I was like,
done.
It's like you broke him, dude. Like, and that's the thing. Like, you never want that to happen to you at a tournament. You don't want to ever, like, you want to. It's tough, dude. It's tough to like throw everything you have at somebody and then not be able to defend or be calm or even regain some composure if you're being attacked. So I think it's one of those things like having a good, and Alex was able to win the match, of course. And the thing is, he was very patient and efficient on defense. And I think it's a huge thing. So you don't want to blow your wad essentially and not have anything left.
Well, right. And it kind of goes back to the idea before, like just like we were talking about with, the analogy of the person burning out.
Yep.
When you can take that punch and you can take everything they've got and throw it at you, and you can just take it and keep coming back at them, there you go. You got something, because then that person's spent, and then all of a sudden, they've thrown their best at you and you're still coming at them. Not a fun place to be.
Nope.
And this is kind of why when we talk about defense, escapes, and survival, it's a cornerstone of jiu-jitsu. So, when you're a grappler that comes into the gym and your coach, they tell you, hey, got to work on survival, escapes, and defense at the beginning. This is why, because, one, from the standpoint of the longer that you can stay in the role and not get submitted, the more times you have to attempt things and try things out. But again, it's just, it builds, that's where everything builds up, because in the beginning, you're going to spend a lot of time defending. So you got to get that built up. And then again, as you want to improve in other areas, you have to be able to take the chances and take the negative side to things, the points where you're getting out positioned, outworked, whatever it might be. One of the things that is a benefit is that when you develop a really strong defensive game, escaping game, your submissions improve dramatically. Here's why. A submission requires you, again, we've talked about this already, but we're reiterating some of these are repetitive, but slight differences to them. A submission requires you to risk your position to get the win. Most submissions involve letting go of a rock solid position as you move to go for the finish. If you can't escape, it's hard to let go of the position. Again, we're going back to it. Fear holds you back. And so one of the things that I noticed from my game is that when I developed a really strong defensive ability, in competition, I went from being a guy who would, beat people in points, right? And was typically one of those people who performed better in the gym than they did in competition. And when I developed the ability to become very good at escaping, to the point where I have yet to meet someone, and I know they're out there, I just haven't rolled with them, right? I have yet to meet someone who's anywhere close to like where I'm at skill level, who can just like put me down and like I can never escape, nothing. Granted, people can beat me and they can chip away at me and they can, work me down, whatever, but like straight out of the gate, I can always escape a little bit. I can always defend pretty well. I feel pretty confident. I've traveled every gym that I've ever traveled to in the last 10 years. I typically start most of the rolls off with just letting people put me in bad spots, just so I can fiddle around and see what I've got. And so again, when I started doing that and developed that ability, that gave me the sort of, again, security's comfort to really go for it. When I go to competitions, I have a very high submission rate now. Most of my matches are finished with submissions because of the fact that, and again, this is what I believe, because of the fact that there is absolutely no fear that I'm ever going to be like stuck in the bottom of side control without being able to get out. I'm going to get out of there. So even if I flop on this move, you're not going to hold me there forever. I have to be mindful of points and things like that. But that allowed me to be very aggressive with submissions. And so it's a really important thing. If you want to be more of a submission oriented person, you got to get better at defense. And again, this is kind of going back to the idea where I'm trying to give you a positive, like a shiny object for doing the thing that you don't really want to do. Kind of going back to the blood work and the other stuff. Here's the fun part, if you will. The fun part of having good defense is that you become so comfortable with that, your submissions can start to crank up. Another benefit, and this is important for all of us, but especially us older folks, is you get less injuries when you have a good understanding of defense and how to keep your body in better positions for survival and escaping. So again, a lot of times some, injuries happen for a number of different things, right? Like falling body weight, where people are being slammed to the ground or falling to the ground and things are happening. That can be a place where you see a lot of injuries. This is why things like leg scissor takedowns are usually limited to the expert divisions, if at all. This is why jumping guard typically is banned, right? It's because of injuries and things like that. That's why you don't do it in the gym. But another place where injuries happen is when you put yourself in bad positions and you get caught up and tangled up into a mess and you zig when you should zag. And so, again, escaping is a bit unique in the sense that sometimes you have to move in less than optimal situations and less than optimal positioning. And again, when we can do that as efficiently and as precisely as possible, even if we are in a weird spot, that leads to less injuries. Also, too, it leads to less injuries when you're not trying to just muscle through things and push and shove and everything like that.
Yeah, and I think probably when you understand being in these positions, getting caught in arm bars, you'll know when to tap if you have to, number one, but also how to readjust and how to maybe position your body in ways that can alleviate some pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and also, I guess if you're good at defense, you're going to get caught less in some of these submissions. So that's obviously there too. There's going to be less risk in that way. So I just think just having a knowledge of a lot of these movements and positions, and yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. You're not gonna explode in a way, right? Like, so you get in a leg lock entanglement, you're not going to turn the wrong way because you're going to know, all right, I've been here before. I know kind of what I need to do, where I need to position, how I need to clear the knee line, all that stuff. So it makes perfect sense.
And here's another one for our older grapplers, our masters crew out there. You can basically tire people out without doing too much. We kind of mentioned this earlier with Alex and some of the other guys.
Mhm.
So, for instance, sometimes when you're rolling with younger grapplers, or sometimes I'll say it this way, this is what I do sometimes. When I'm rolling with younger grapplers, sometimes I will let them out position me a bit, and like instead of fighting them for every single position, with guard passing and so forth, I will allow them to get into positions like side control. And I tend to find that because my defense is good, they're not able to submit me and they start to slow down because they're using up energy and they're not getting much return for it. And then afterwards, I get my guard back. They're a little slower, they're a little bit more tired, and then I'm more, on the same level with them. And I go back on offense and they have a little bit less in their gas tank. And so, like, especially like if I'm rolling with one of the young guys in the early rolls of the gym, I'll just kind of lay back and let them put me in bad spots for a little bit, defend a little bit, play defense, and then I'll spin it around towards the later period. I also used to do this in competition when I would be up against big guys, like real big guys,
Mm.
especially when I was in the adult black belt division. I remember, the matches are 10 minutes, and I know that I can't take it to a big black belt for 10 minutes straight. So what I would typically do is I would start the match off with and my focus would be about 4 to 5 minutes of it would be a lot of defense. And I would tell whoever was there, cheering me on or coaching me, I would tell them, hey, 5 minutes, let me know. And
Mhm.
so I would just kind of play defense, fiddle around, make sure I was protecting my guard and everything else. And then right around the 5 minute mark, I would kick it back on and start to reverse it. Now, that strategy worked pretty damn well most of the time, although there were times where that didn't work. I remember one time I went against a guy named Orlando Sanchez,
Oh yeah.
the late Orlando Sanchez, a former 80cc competitor and champ. So me and him, we competed. I believe I was his first. I think it's what he told me. I was his first black belt match. So he had competed and everything else, and we were in the open division at the Chicago Open. This is 2013. I had won my division in the heavyweight, which is 207 pounds, and he had won his division, which I don't think he had any matches. He just sort of got the nod in ultra heavyweight. And I saw him, and he had his gi on, and he's just a short, stout little fella, and not little, but short, stout fella, wide, but not very tall. And so I didn't really think much of it. I thought he was probably just going to be kind of a fat guy that was out of shape and going to tire out. I was wrong. So I got in there and, I was playing my guard a little bit. I was waiting for the right opportunity. I remember, someone said, "Hey, Chewy, it's 5 minutes." And I thought to myself, I'm turning this sucker around. I arm dragged him, came up to my knees, got a hold of his leg. Like I had a good bite on like a single leg. He ran away with such quickness that I was just like dumbfounded. And then he turned back around and just bulldozed right into me. And, I remember telling someone that rolling with him was like trying to grapple a moving vehicle, right? You know what I mean? It was something. It's like, it's like a small moving vehicle. And I remember thinking, well, this is not going to play out like I anticipated.
Yeah.
And the match ended with him winning by a small amount of points. He had 2 points, I had 0. So it wasn't like a complete like just slaughter or whatever. And he went on to do the same thing to a bunch of really good grapplers that like pans that year and stuff. So I said, okay, I feel a bit better about myself. I remember he went against Andre Gaval, and Andre Gaval won on a ref's decision, but he couldn't sweep him, and Orlando's on top of him. So I felt a little bit better for myself, because I'm like,
Yeah.
Andre Gaval, one of my sort of, you want to talk about like your Mount Rushmore jiu-jitsu. That's like one of the guys that's up there for me as far as
Sure.
people that I modeled after when I was up and coming. And I said, well, if he couldn't do it, then I feel a little bit better about myself for not being able to sweep that damn dude. But he was always a very nice dude to me. Was always very cool. But again, a lot of times when I'm going against younger people, it's a really smart idea to have that defense, so that if they come at you and they have all that energy, you play a little bit more defensively, you wait, and then you come back at them.
Yeah, just try to weather the storm, because I think that's what you have to do. You can't match their pace, especially if you're older. They got a little more energy than you do. And going back to Orlando, that dude is incredibly athletic for his size.
Oh yeah.
Like how he was deceivingly athletic for a dude that he had a belly on him. He was a heavier set guy, but like he could move in some ways. It's like, you're not supposed to move like that. You're not supposed to be that agile and explosive. And he was pretty incredible. So, and he had that one really incredible pass at ADCC. I think he hopped over, yeah, jumped over. I don't know who he was going against. It was such a beautiful pass. I've never forgotten.
He used it several times, but yeah, I know what you're talking
It's
about.
very good, very athletic guy. But yeah, that's cool. That's cool you went against him, because he had quite a career in jiu-jitsu too. So
yeah, rest in peace, Orlando Sanchez.
yep.
Here's the next one for you guys. This is and this is kind of important. It kind of goes to this. A lot of these kind of reiterate over top of each other. But you kind of touched on it, is you have to be able to weather the storm against younger grapplers.
Yep.
Or we can say younger, or even just more athletic grapplers. Maybe you're younger, but you're not super athletic.
Yeah.
You have to be able to weather that storm, because you could be incredibly technical, right? It's amazingly technical. But the reality is athleticism, physical attributes can run roughshod over your technique. Yes, I know there's a myth of jiu-jitsu that says technique is everything. Yeah, okay. But it's just not true. Technique is really important. But again, if you're competing against someone who of a similar skill level, or you're rolling with someone of a similar skill level, you have to expect they're going to know what they're doing. They're not completely stupid. This isn't like UFC 1 where, Royce Gracie has this magic trick that nobody else really knows. This is people have some understanding. And so, you'll have two varying degrees of probably percentages, you know what I mean, of you're better than this person or that person. And so you need to be able to weather that storm, because sometimes you'll find yourself in a situation where you're technically superior, you have better tactics and everything else, but you simply can't seem to execute on them. And so again, it goes back to this idea of slowing things down, weathering the storm. And again, you can weather the storm when you have good defensive abilities, and not just, from side control, mount, back mount, but whether it's a defensive ability against submissions, whether it's defensive guard retention game, any of the stuff that involves you having to respond to their attacks. Again, it helps you weather the storm so you can be more effective on the mat. Here's one for you. Grappling becomes more fun when your defense is effective. At least this is my experience. It's also a lot more fun when you're safe, no matter what position you're in, right? But I think about this when I developed the ability to become better at escapes. You have all these cascading positive effects in your game, but also too, the damn thing just becomes fun, because then you're not getting submitted all the time. You're not getting crushed all the time. So, it's not a lot of fun to be on the bottom of mount or side control or wherever, getting smashed or submitted or whatever it is. Whereas, if you get in the bottom of side control and you can pretty reliably defend and escape, it scratches the same itch as sweeping someone or passing their guard. You're using technique successfully and it feels good to do it. And so now, instead of it being only, I feel good when I'm doing submissions or guard passes or offense, you start to feel good with your defense, because of like, oh man, this is cool. Like, I'm actually able to use this stuff successfully, and I'm actually using good technique, methodically using good technique, systematically using good technique. There's a thought process to it. There's strategy to it. That stuff makes jiu-jitsu fun, because now you have a whole nother area of jiu-jitsu that you can experience the fun of executing technique effectively. So it's very simple, but again, useful.
Yeah, I mean, you're constantly. It's kind of like when you're a beginner, you're constantly kind of getting submitted, tapped, and you can't really play any offense. So it goes back to some of those earlier points. It's like, well, you have good defense, you're getting submitted less. Now you can be more offensive in those capacities. So I think it all. It's kind of cyclical. It all makes sense. You have to have one. You can't have one without the other. You can't have the defense without the offense, and vice versa.
You can try. It's probably not going to be a great time for you.
Well, yeah, I guess you. I mean, you guess you can, but yeah, you're just not going to be. You're going to be one of those people that goes in and you have all these attacks, and then once you get all your attacks stopped, and you got nothing, and then you have
And
nothing to rely on. Yeah,
and I've met guys like this before. I've actually rolled with black belts where it was very clear that they never spent time in these positions anymore, right? Because again, think about this. This is something where the white belt mindset that we have in jiu-jitsu, you have to kind of recapture that multiple times. So, when a white belt comes into the gym, what does the coach kind of say to him typically? Oh man, keep an open mind, don't get frustrated, leave your ego at the door, embrace the escapes, embrace the defense, put yourself in bad positions and so forth. A lot of upper belts sort of forget that and they lose that and they have to recapture that because what happens a lot of times, let's say for instance, a coach doesn't want to look bad in front of their students. I would not have believed this unless but I received too many messages and I've talked to too many people whose opinion I trust. There's so many upper belts that do not roll with like their students or they don't roll with anybody under them because they don't want to look bad, right? They don't want to look bad. They don't want to do it. I hear about it so often and it's bizarre to me.
is that a red
Because
flag, Chewy? Honestly, is that a red flag if you're going to a gym and the instructor doesn't roll?
hell yeah, it's a red flag. Now let
I
me sort
mean,
of
yeah,
let me put a caveat to this. Do they have some sort of underlying issue, like injury wise, that maybe would limit them? Then yeah, okay, you can give concessions there. But assuming that they're like relatively healthy and things like that, like and they're not ever rolling with their students, that's a bit odd to me.
yeah,
I'm not saying you can't roll, and again, if you have medical stuff, whatever. But assuming that you're of able body and mind, why the hell wouldn't you be on the mats with your students, moving around and doing things? I find it strange. Not saying you have to roll all the time. Talked about this with like Sean Applegate on the
yeah.
podcast, who's a really good coach in jiu-jitsu with his 10th Planet guys. He was talking about the fact that, he'll train and roll and he'll find himself in there. He doesn't emphasize his rolling over other people's because he's
Right,
just focused on coaching, but he's still on the mats moving around. So
right.
again, he's not going out there thinking, "Hey, I'm going to go smash through Elijah or Ryan Aiken or whatever." That's not his job. Just like we think, Phil Jackson is not necessarily going to slam dunk on Michael Jordan kind of thing back in the day,
Right.
or Kobe and Shaq, right? He's there to coach them, not necessarily beat the hell out of them, right? But so
Right.
that's the idea. Again, it's one of those things where I think that would be a red flag, and I think it's strange. But nonetheless, I've seen and met black belts who like you could feel like they just felt very weak from those positions, but then they would have incredibly strong offensive games. So, getting past their guard and dealing with all their other stuff is like a pain in the butt. But man, all of a sudden you get to their back or you get them into side control or mount and you feel like they lost a couple belt ranks.
Mm,
And again, that happens a lot of times because what happens, the ego gets back into it. We have this little story we tell ourselves in our head. Oh, I'm the best guy here, and I don't want to look bad in front of my students, or my students will think differently of them, or yada yada yada, so forth. And then we start to avoid going to these places that we should go to because we've gotten attached to a very pleasant story of, I'm good at this. This is the same reason why you see higher level belts that will sort of scorn certain techniques in jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying that there's, maybe they have their own philosophy, but for instance, leg locks is a great example. So many old school black belts just sort of, wrote off leg locks. They don't work. You lack control. They're too dangerous, this and that, whatever. And I think the reality was that a lot of them just didn't want to do it because they didn't want to go to a place where they were going to be a white belt again. Because essentially, like,
yeah.
you don't have any experience here, so you're not that good. And it was a bad idea to do that, right? Like they lost that. But again, think about this: if a white belt had came into the gym and they were telling them that they need to learn jiu-jitsu, let's say it was a wrestler, and you're telling them to learn how to play guard, what would you have said? No, no, no. Embrace jiu-jitsu, keep an open mind, like da da da. But then you lost it. And so I think you have to re-embrace that white belt mindset over and over again throughout your jiu-jitsu. And if you find that you become resistant towards working towards your escapes, you have to recapture that and do it again.
Yeah, you
Super
have to
important.
force yourself. I mean, you have to force yourself. You have to almost like plan it in somehow. Is that
You got to
maybe some?
prioritize, just
Yeah,
prioritize it. Just like, just like you would anything else. Oh, I'm working on this. I'm working on that. I'm working on my sweeps. I'm working on this, then you say, okay, well, let me work in some rounds from defense. And again, your gym may do this with like situational rounds where you're in dominant position, but if they don't, it's a good idea to include some rounds where maybe you get someone who's, especially if they're a little less experienced than you, let them put you in bad spots just so you can work out of the position and do so with a little bit of a buffer of skill where you can play around a
yeah,
little bit more, and you learn how to use that position just like you would, any other position where you start to slow down, you take your time, you think about how to use it correctly, you can do it step by step.
yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, and I think it gives you a better, even if you're not quite as sharp, it gives you more of a little more room for error and kind of things like that. So
Another benefit to it is that if you're a competitor, you become hard to score on when you have good defense. There's different specific things like guard retention or being able to, turtle up and get back to guard, things like that. But it can be very tough to put to score on someone who's really good at defense. If you watch some of the matches from like some of the ADCCs and you watch some of these high level grapplers go,
yeah,
there are times where you will see matches where their defensive ability is so good that the person almost scores multiple times, but just never finally does it. Same thing with the IBGFs. You'll watch guys where they just can't quite get them down and actually put them down into a scoring position. And you could watch it and think, well, this guy's giving up certain positions like his back momentarily while he's regarding or whatever. But those people are so good at doing that because they develop that skill from those positions that sure, you could literally see their shoulder blades and you should be able to get the hook in theoretically, but because they've gotten so good at, uh, using their defense and escapes, you simply can't do it. And so it becomes an incredibly useful thing for competitions because in competition, especially when you're talking about points, it's really important that you can actually defend because you don't want to be one of those things where, you're going for a position and then they pass your guard and immediately they're just smashing you and they're off to the races. You want to be able to play defensively and stop them from scoring. Super important. And again, it becomes more and more important the higher you get in jiu-jitsu because then the offensive abilities get better. So your defensive abilities have to as well.
one of the examples, it's not a points format, but it's CGI too. When you looked at Wagner Rocha, Wagner
Mm.
was there, 41, 42 years old, and dude, they just put him out there because he's the dude that's just going to not get submitted. Because with the rule set, if nobody submits, if neither person submits, then they are both out. They just kind of put him out there to basically knock people out, like just kind of not sacrificing him per se, but like he's the guy. Like they know that if they get him out there, it's incredibly hard to submit him. He may not be able to be terribly offensive. I mean, he's older as well. He's done very well. He's a very
Well, also
incredible
too, he was a
grappler.
lot of times he was mismatched like with weight.
Yeah,
So
he's smaller.
they used him as a stopper
Yeah.
basically when like Victor Hugo was out there, like throw him in there, like because if Victor Hugo goes against one of the smaller guys, he's probably going to get him. But you put him against Wagner. Wagner's not the biggest guy, but his defensive ability is just so rock solid that.
Yeah.
And even going back to like when I was thinking about that in my mind when I was talking about the scoring, there's a match with him and Isaac Michelle at
Hmm.
the ADCC a couple years ago.
Yes, I
And
remember
if
that.
you watch that match, those dudes are going back and forth into turtle, taking each other back, and neither one of them are really able to get any points scored. It's one of the most active matches with such a low point spread that you'll see. And again, if you watch Wagner's matches, I mean, just incredible defense. I think the only guy that I've ever seen really just work him really hard with submissions is Gordon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than that,
Gordon.
it's other than that, I mean, he's been beaten before for sure. He's been beaten and he's been caught
Yeah.
and stuff. But that's the only time where I've seen him just broken down like that. Other than that, everybody looks. I mean, he's rock solid.
I mean, he might have been, was he the oldest guy in the tournament? He's the oldest guy at CGI
Yeah,
too.
hundred
He's the
percent,
oldest dude. And
hundred
he's
percent.
probably what, middleweight or like what, 190, 200, something like that. I mean, right there, kind of middle of the road, not the biggest guy, not the smallest guy, but just gritty, tough, old grizzly veteran.
That is right. And one of the things, guys, for you guys, if you're trying to develop that ability, right? It's a mixture of things. One, you want to have good information, right? So there's obviously you can talk to your coach, you can study YouTube, there's instructional courses and things like that. But then, as we were talking about, you have to then put into practice the stuff that you're doing, and you have to get focused on it. And you can do this through situational training, where
Yeah.
different ways you can do that, of course. And if nothing else, a very simple idea is simply going to your gym, and when you're rolling with people, let them put you in bad positions. Let them put you in positions you don't want to be in. Let them put you in a almost locked triangle. Let them start with the armbar lock. Let them pass your guard just so you can escape it, or let them pass your guard a little bit so you can work your guard retention. All that stuff's really important because, again, no matter what, it comes down to your body developing the sensitivity. We were talking about this last night at the gym. Um, when you think about, I've always brought up this analogy, listening to jazz musicians talk about playing music. In jazz, there's a lot of improvisation, right? You do things and you feel the music, you feel the instrument, you're just kind of going through like what feels right. You're not necessarily thinking about, I'm going through this six part step with this chord and that chord. You just
Mhm.
know the damn thing so well that you just know what to do, right? You can feel it. It's even like this, when you're faced with some random situation in your kitchen or in the bathroom or something falls, you're not calculating everything. Like, you're not calculating how fast the object's dropping, or you're just reacting to it because you've done so many different things with your body over your lifetime that you sort of adjust to it so you can grab it. Same thing happens when you do jiu-jitsu for a long enough period of time, especially when you work in these positions. You start to develop an intuition of what you need to do sometimes. Now, if you couple
Yeah.
that with good information, understanding of basic principles and concepts in strategies, then it's really important, right? That's useful. But then when you use those again and again through training and situational training and active drills, that's where you develop the ability to then, essentially, your body's just, it's more intuitive. You're going off of intuition rather than having to go through a 16-part step-by-step process, whereas you just feel it out. You feel through the position. There's a famous quote from, I think it's Charlie Parker. He says, you master the instrument, you master the music, and then you forget all that shit and just play.
Mhm.
And the idea was that you spend time sort of, mastering specific, techniques with the music, going through chord progressions and, understanding how all this stuff works, right? And then eventually you say, screw that, and I'm just going to play. Right. And I remember there was a famous story with Miles Davis where this guy, I believe he was playing the piano or something. He's playing the piano and they're doing like a thing together, right? He's playing the piano, Miles is playing his instrument, and he hits the wrong chord. And he knew it was the wrong chord for the song that they're playing. And Miles is doing this, like this, he just improvising the song that as they're going through during a period of time. And he presses the wrong note on the piano, whatever it is. And Miles Davis plays this instrument and looks at him, gives him like a slant eye, like, you dumb bastard, but plays the song and plays off the wrong note the right way, makes it sound great. Nobody notices.
Mm.
And then afterwards, he said that when they were backstage, Miles is like, hey, like, giving him a talking to, like, don't ever do that to me again.
Mm.
And you think about that, like, a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, it's very similar. Things aren't always going to happen is like perfectly. They're not going to happen textbook. They're not going to happen the way that you necessarily have planned for. And so when you develop that intuition from these positions, you figure out ways to essentially play the wrong note the right way, to play the bad position where you're out positioned or you're in a messed up spot. You learn how to play that the right way. And so you develop that through situational training, live training with an opponent. And a really good thing to do is, if you guys have anybody in your gym that's less experienced than you, this is the best place to start,
Yep.
is go with them and put yourself in a bad spot or whatever spot you want to work on, and use them to actively, roll. Even if, like, if you're at your gym, this is something I talk about in that ebook that I give away in the video, the Focus Jiu-Jitsu ebook that I mentioned to you guys on my website. When you get that book, one of the things I talk about is doing this strategies where you take the less experienced people and you use them as essentially an active drilling partner,
Mhm.
or situational training partner, where even if you're just doing open rolls in your gym, you come in with that specific thing that you're focused on. This way you make sure that you do not, or you make sure that you actually get some practice from there, and you're using less experienced people. So this way, there's a bit of a skill buffer. There's a bit of a skill difference. So you have a little bit more room for error. If you want to think about it, like if you're ever lifting weights and you're playing around with the form on a particular exercise, you don't play around with form when you're at your max, right? You play
Yeah.
around with your form when you're at lighter weight, because the room for error is a lot better. If you've got your max weight and you're playing around with positioning, you could pretty easily injure yourself, or just not lift the weight successfully. Whereas when you're working with less weight, it allows you to play a lot more, so you can test things out, feel out the position, and then work up heavier after you feel comfortable. Same thing with jiu-jitsu when you're rolling with someone a little bit less experienced.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And like I said, the importance of the room for error, and then you can kind of use that to figure out, okay, well, I barely escaped, or I got in a bad spot, and you'll start to figure out like what mistakes you're making or where you're making some errors, and you'll be able to correct those. It's not just such a harsh punishment where like you're gonna get, maybe you make a mistake and you get submitted every single time. You may still be able to get out, but just knowing, all right, that probably wasn't the right thing to do. I was still able to wiggle my way out of it, or keep myself from getting submitted. But yeah, it makes sense.
All right, guys, thanks for being with us today. Hopefully you guys got at least an idea or two to chew on. And if you're someone that isn't currently actively consistently going back and working on their escapes and their defense, then I hope I've pushed you towards that a little bit. There's been several things that escapes have done, as one just example to leave you guys with. I remember when I was a purple belt, I was struggling a lot. Purple belt was probably my roughest belt. And I remember I was struggling with some different things in my game. I remember once I got submitted by a guy with some leg locks, and another time I was getting submitted left and right from triangles. Those were two of my weaknesses early on. And I remember, to help me correct those, my coach, Colin, would start me in like a loose ankle lock, or would start me in a loose triangle. And it was basically he would these like month-long themes where every time I rolled, I had to start in these positions,
Mm.
and it's not fun, lots of getting submitted a lot. And the benefit though is that it made my jiu-jitsu a lot better. I don't get caught in triangles very often, and if I do, I can escape typically if I want to. Um, you know, and in competition, I don't think I've been submitted with a triangle since that particular time in my training. I've been submitted with other stuff, sure, but not triangles. And it's amazing what a simple month can do when you're dialed in on it and focused, right? And so I encourage you guys, like, go back to your escapes and your defense. You would be surprised at how much ground you can cover in a short month when you're focused on what you're doing. It's really important. And so if escapes are one of those things where you struggle with them, you struggle using them, you have fear associated with them, you panic when you're in bad situations, that is where you need to go. You need to go there. You need to focus on that position. There's that famous quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson: do the thing and you get the power. Do the
Mm.
thing and you have the power, something to that effect, right? So you go do the thing. You go to the position you don't want to be in, and that's how you get the power. That's how you improve your game, right? So big thanks to you guys for being here. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. You can check them out. Charles Webb. They make amazing CBD products. They're one of the OGs in the CBD space. And again, if you guys have never tried CBD or any of their products and you want to test them out, you're curious about it, try it out for 30 days. Go to their website. You can save 30% off on your order using Chewjitsu 30 at the order when you go to charleswebb.com. And when you do that, you get your 30% off the order. You can try whatever supplement you want, see its effects, see how it helps you, and then kind of go from there. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. You can check them out at epicrollbjj.com. If you're looking to get some new gear, rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, whatever it is, you can save 20% with the promo code Chewjitsu20 at checkout. And if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can roll on over to the Patreon website at patreon.com/the Chewjitsu podcast. Again, there's a ton of content in that sucker. A couple things that are worthwhile, I think, that are useful are the specific warm-up routines that Eugene's put together. Again, for a lot of you guys that are listening, a lot of you are older. I know our demographics were, and when I say older, I'm just saying north of 30, right? And the older you get, the more important it is to have some sort of regular routine to loosen your old bag of bones out.
Mm-hmm.
To have some sort of mobility routine. Doesn't have to be super long and take forever. And Eugene put together some relatively short routines in there that you can follow along that can make your hips feel amazing, can make your shoulders feel more open. Like when we recorded those, they were at our jiu-jitsu camps, and it was always funny. I'm just doing the stretches myself, and when we're done, you would hear several people say, "Oh my God, that feels amazing," right? Just by hitting some targeted stretches to the specific areas that jiu-jitsu people have, it can make a big difference. And so again, you can use these as a cool down, you can use these as a warm up. We also have a lot of other stuff, both specific technical content, and then also like sort of just fun content with me and Eugene, and then guest interviews, things like that, stuff that's not released anywhere. If you guys want to get it, go to the website at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And last but not least, guys, if you want to get my daily email, go to my website at jujitsu.net/join. And if you join up, you will get my daily email. And then afterwards, I will send you an ebook and a video that goes into 12 different strategies on how to be more focused with your training. As we said earlier, being focused is really important. I hope I've stressed that to you at some point in the decade-long period that I've been doing videos and content. And if you sort of think that and you'd like to be more focused with your training and improve faster, like I said, you can make a lot of headway in a month. If you go to the website at jujitsu.net/join, you'll get the ebook and the video. They'll tell you 12 different ways to do that and how you can improve a little faster with your game. So if you're someone that feels kind of aimless, you feel like you're not making any improvement, you're stuck in a plateau, that kind of thing, go get the ebook and the video. It'll help out. And again, if you don't like the email, you can always unsubscribe at any time. So anyway, guys, thank you for being here. Hopefully you enjoyed the podcast, and we will talk to you next time.